You know there's something about watching your child grow up that breaks your heart in ways you never expect. I'm talking about those moments when you realize the sweet little boy who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms has become a stranger who sees you as nothing more than an inconvenience. But sometimes, just sometimes, life has a way of protecting you from heartbreak you didn't even see coming. This is Linda's story, and let me tell you, it's one that'll make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. Picture this: a 65-year-old widow living quietly by a Minnesota lake, carrying a secret that could change everything. Her son's getting married, and she's about to discover just how much that wedding ring is really worth to him. But here's the twist that'll knock your socks off. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is letting them show you exactly who they really are. What happened next will make you want to hug your own mother and maybe rethink how well you really know the people closest to you. Stay with me because this story has more turns than a country road. And the ending. Well, let's just say Linda's late husband knew exactly what he was doing. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible family stories that'll remind you why blood doesn't always make family, but choices always do. The morning mist was just lifting off Clearwater Lake when Linda Barrett stood at her kitchen window, watching a pair of loons glide across the water's surface. At 65, she'd grown accustomed to these quiet mornings in her lakeside cabin, where the only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves and the distant call of birds she'd learned to identify over the past 4 years of solitude. Linda wasn't the kind of woman who demanded attention or made grand gestures. She was small-boned and soft-spoken, with silver hair she kept in a neat bob, and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of someone who'd learned to find contentment in simple things. But as she sipped her coffee that October morning, Linda's mind drifted to a memory that still made her smile. Nathan, at 7 years old, running into the kitchen with muddy shoes and grass-stained knees, shouting, "Mama, look what I found." He'd held up a smooth stone from the lake shore, convinced it was a treasure. Linda had made a big show of examining it, declaring it the most beautiful stone she'd ever seen. That night, Nathan had placed it on her nightstand. "So you can dream about adventures, Mama." The stone was still there 4 years after Tom's funeral, 26 years after Nathan had given it to her. But the boy who'd brought her treasures had gradually become a man who spoke to her with polite detachment. Tom Barrett had been gone for 4 years now, taken by a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March. But what he'd left behind wasn't just grief. It was a carefully constructed safety net that Linda hadn't fully understood until much later. Tom had been more than just a contractor. His construction company had landed several major commercial projects in the Twin Cities area during the building boom of the 2000s. More importantly, he'd been a shrewd investor, quietly purchasing rental properties and investing in tech stocks long before they became household names. "I'm building something for you, Linda," he'd told her during one of their evening walks around the lake. "Something that'll keep you safe, no matter what happens to me." She'd thought he meant life insurance and the paid-off cabin. She'd had no idea about the $7 million he'd accumulated through decades of careful planning and smart investments. The relationship with Nathan had changed so gradually that Linda had almost convinced herself it was normal. He was 33 now, successful in his marketing career, but somewhere between his teenage years and adulthood, something had shifted. The phone calls became duty rather than desire conversations that felt like items being crossed off a to-do list. The call came on a Thursday evening in late September, just as Linda was settling down with her evening tea. "Mom, I have some news." Nathan's voice carried that particular tone of forced enthusiasm. "Rachel and I are getting married." Linda's heart jumped with hope. Maybe marriage would soften Nathan's edges, remind him that family mattered. "Oh, Nathan, that's wonderful," Linda said. "Tell me everything. When did you propose?" But Nathan's version of everything was a 3-minute summary that felt more like a business transaction. The wedding would be in 2 weeks at a venue in Bloomington. "The 2 weeks, that's very soon." Do you need help with anything? No, we've got it all handled. Nathan interrupted. Rachel's very organized. She's got everything under control. When the wedding invitation arrived by email, Linda stared at the elegant design. Nathan Barrett and Rachel Morrison. No mention of parents, no together with their families. Just two names, as if they'd emerged into the world fully formed. The week before, the wedding brought a small crisis that gave Linda hope. Nathan called sounding stressed. Mom, Rachel's grandmother is in the hospital. She might not make it to the wedding. Rachel's really upset. Her grandmother practically raised her. Is there anything I can do? Actually, could you maybe pick up some flowers? For the church, Rachel had ordered these elaborate arrangements. But with everything happening, Linda spent the next day creating perfect arrangements for her son's wedding. She chose white roses and baby's breath, personally delivering them to the church. But when she arrived at the wedding, no one seemed to know who had provided the flowers. The wedding coordinator thanked the florist during announcements, and Linda watched Nathan and Rachel accept compliments on their beautiful choices without mentioning her contribution. The wedding venue sparkled with crystal and white roses, filled with people Linda didn't recognize. She found herself directed to a seat in the back row. "Excuse me, I'm Nathan's mother." The coordinator consulted her clipboard with a frown. "Oh yes, Mrs. Barrett, you're right here in Section C." Section C was behind Nathan's college friends, his co-workers, and several rows of Rachel's extended family. During the ceremony, Linda waited for Nathan to catch her eye, but his attention was entirely focused on Rachel. At the reception, Nathan's greeting was perfunctory. "Mom, thanks for coming. Everything looks beautiful, doesn't it?" "The flowers turned out lovely," Linda said, hoping he might acknowledge her effort. Nathan glanced around distractedly. "Yeah, Rachel has great taste." He was already moving to the next table. During the speeches, Linda waited to hear her name mentioned. But the best man talked about college adventures, Rachel's father spoke about gaining a son, and Nathan's own speech thanked everyone except the woman who had given him life. Linda left quietly, during the dancing slipping out, while Nathan spun Rachel around the dance floor. No one noticed her departure. The drive back to Clearwater took 2 hours, and Linda spent most of it remembering a different Nathan. The 10-year-old who'd made her breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. The teenager who'd called every Sunday from college. The young man who'd once said, "I hope I marry someone just like you, Mom." When had that boy disappeared? A week after the wedding, Nathan called with an invitation. "Hey, Mom, Rachel, and I would love to have you over for dinner this weekend. Now that things have settled down, we'd like to spend some quality time with you." Saturday evening found Linda at Nathan's house. A colonial revival with a 3-car garage and magazine-perfect landscaping. Rachel answered the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The house was beautiful, but somehow lacking warmth. No family photos, no personal touches that indicated this was a home rather than a showplace. Nathan emerged from a home office, carrying a folder and wearing a serious expression. As they moved to the dining room, Linda noticed something odd. The table was set for 3, but there was no food, just wine glasses and a neat stack of papers at Linda's seat. "I hope you don't mind," Rachel said, pouring wine. "But we thought we'd have drinks first and order something later. Nathan has some important things to discuss." Linda felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a meeting. Nathan began. "Rachel and I have been talking, and we're concerned about you living alone out there by the lake." "What kind of concerns?" Rachel leaned forward with carefully crafted sympathy. "You're getting older, and that cabin is so isolated. What if something happened? What if you fell? It could be hours before anyone found you," Nathan added. "We've been losing sleep, worrying about it." "I'm only 65. I'm perfectly healthy." "Of course you are," Rachel said quickly. "But accidents happen, and with your situation being what it is." "My situation," Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Financially, Dad was just a contractor, and I know you're probably living on Social Security and whatever small savings you have." He reached for the papers. That's why we think it would be smart to get some legal protections in place. This would just give me the ability to help you if you ever need it. Make medical decisions, handle your finances. It's really just a safety net. Linda looked at the documents. Durable power of attorney, in bold letters. The room felt airless. I don't understand. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Of course you are, Rachel said, honey sweet. This is just preventative, like insurance. But Linda could see calculating patience in their faces. They weren't worried about her well-being. They were worried about something else entirely. I need to think about this, Linda said, gathering the papers. Nathan's jaw tightened. Mom, it's really not that complicated. It's just paperwork. I said I need to think about it. Linda stood clutching the documents. This is a big decision. That night, shaken by what felt like an ambush, Linda finally did something Tom had asked her to do 4 years ago. She opened the metal box he'd told her about. Inside the box, Linda found documents that made her hands shake. Investment portfolios, property deeds, trust documents. At the bottom was a sealed envelope with her name in Tom's handwriting. My dearest Linda, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've finally opened the box. The investments I made, the property, deals, the careful planning. It all paid off better than I imagined. You're not just comfortable, Linda. You're wealthy. $7 million wealthy. I know that scares you, but here's what scared me more. Nathan finding out about this money while you're still grieving, still desperate to maintain whatever connection you have left with him. I love our son, but I'm not blind to who he's become. The boy who brought you dandelions has grown into a man who sees relationships as transactions. I've watched him calculate the value of every conversation. Don't tell him about the money. Let him show you who he really is when he thinks you have nothing to offer but yourself. Because if he can't love you when he thinks you're just a lonely widow, then he doesn't deserve to love you when he knows you could change his life with a single check. All my love forever, Tom. Linda called Carolyn Foster, a retired estate attorney and friend. They met for coffee, and Linda laid out the situation. Tom was right to be worried, Carolyn said. What your son tried to pull, that's textbook financial elder abuse. The fancy dinner, the concerned tone, I've seen it 100 times. They set up an ironclad trust with provisions protecting Linda's assets and autonomy. 2 weeks later, Nathan called with another dinner invitation. This time, Linda was ready. She arrived carrying a small gift bag and wearing a serene smile. This time there were cooking smells, and the dinner was pleasant. But as Rachel served dessert, Nathan mentioned the power of attorney again. Have you had a chance to look over those papers, Mom? Linda smiled and pulled out her own folder. Actually, I've been doing some planning of my own. She placed the trust documents on the table, watching Nathan's face change. Confusion, then calculation, then something like panic. What is this? My way of making sure I'm protected. I consulted with an attorney and set up a trust that handles all my assets and medical decisions. Rachel leaned over, her composure slipping. This seems extensive and expensive. How did you afford? She caught herself, but not quickly enough. How did I afford what, Rachel? The silence stretched uncomfortably. The doorbell rang. That would be Carolyn. She offered to drive me home. Who's Carolyn? My attorney, the one who helped me set up the trust. Carolyn appeared, looking every inch the competent legal professional. The transformation in the room was immediate. Nathan and Rachel's hospitality evaporated. As Linda gathered her things, she felt sadness and relief. The son she'd raised had shown his true colors, and while it broke her heart, it also freed her. 3 days later, Linda's phone rang. It wasn't Nathan, it was Rachel. Linda, could we meet? Just the two of us. There are things I need to say. They met at a quiet cafe in downtown Bloomington. Rachel looked different, younger somehow, without her usual polished armor. I owe you an apology. Rachel began, her voice barely above a whisper. Not the kind Nathan wants me to give, but a real one. Linda waited, studying this woman who'd helped orchestrate the attempt to steal her autonomy. I grew up in a family where money was love. Rachel continued. My grandmother paid for everything: our house, our cars, my education. When she got sick, my parents fought over who would get power of attorney. They saw her as a bank account, not a person. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I learned that family money was shared money, that if you had it and didn't share it, you were selfish. When Nathan told me about you living alone in that cabin, struggling on Social Security, I couldn't understand why you weren't helping us with our debts. So you decided to help yourselves. We decided Nathan should have control. Yes. For your own good, we told ourselves. Rachel looked down at her hands. I know how that sounds. I know what we almost did. Linda felt a flicker of understanding. What changed your mind? Seeing you walk out that night. The way you carried yourself. Dignified, unbroken. I realized we'd tried to steal more than your money. We'd tried to steal your dignity. Rachel wiped her eyes. My grandmother died angry and alone because everyone around her saw dollar signs instead of a person who needed love. And Nathan, does he understand this? Rachel's face crumpled. Nathan's scared Linda. We have so much debt. My student loans, the mortgage, credit cards. He works 60-hour weeks and still can't get ahead. When he thought about you having some savings, he saw a lifeline. That doesn't excuse what you both did. No, it doesn't, but I want you to know, I'm leaving him. Linda blinked in surprise. What? I can't be with someone who would manipulate his own mother. And I can't be the kind of person who enables that. Rachel stood up. I wanted to tell you myself before he finds out. He's going to blame you, but this is my choice. As Rachel walked away, Linda felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but sadness for the young woman who'd learned the wrong lessons about love and money. 2 weeks later, Linda was tending her small garden when she heard a car in the driveway. Nathan stood there looking haggard and older than his 33 years. She left me, he said without preamble. Rachel's gone. Linda set down her gardening gloves. I'm sorry. Are you? Nathan's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Because I think you might have planned this whole thing. Planned what exactly? The trust, the lawyer turning Rachel against me. You knew we were struggling, and you let us think you were poor while you were sitting on a fortune. Linda felt something cold settle in her chest. How do you know about the money? Nathan's face flushed. Rachel told me what she suspected before she left. So I did some digging. Public records, property transfers. Turns out my contractor father was quite the businessman. He stepped closer, his voice rising. $7 million, Mom. $7 million. Do you know what that could have meant for us? What it could have meant for my marriage? Your marriage ended because you tried to steal from your own mother. Steal? Nathan laughed bitterly. It's family money. I'm your only child. It's going to be mine anyway when you die. The words hung in the air like a slap. Linda stared at her son, seeing clearly for the first time the man he'd become. Is that what you're waiting for? Nathan, for me to die? Something in her voice must have penetrated his anger, because Nathan's face changed. I didn't mean, Mom, I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. Linda's voice was steady, calm. You meant exactly that. You've been waiting for me to die so you could inherit money you think you deserve. Nathan's shoulders sagged. I'm drowning, Mom. The debt, the pressure, trying to keep up with Rachel's expectations. When I found out about the money, I felt betrayed. Like you'd been lying to me. I never lied to you. I just didn't tell you something that was none of your business. None of my business. I'm your son. Being my son doesn't give you the right to my money while I'm alive. Linda's voice hardened. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to try to steal my independence. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was small. What happens now? Linda looked at this man who'd once been her little boy, who'd once brought her treasures from the lake shore. Now you figure out who you want to be, Nathan. The man your father and I raised, or the man who sees his mother as an obstacle to his inheritance. I don't know how. You start by getting help. Real help. Therapy, financial counseling, whatever it takes. to understand why you think other people's money can solve your problems. Nathan nodded, tears in his eyes. I've lost everything, haven't I, Rachel? You, my self-respect. You've lost what you chose to throw away, Linda said gently. But some things can be rebuilt if you're willing to do the work. 6 months later, Linda stood in the garden of her new cottage at Lakeside Grove, a community designed for active seniors. The move had been liberating. She kept what brought her joy and donated everything else. Her relationship with Nathan had evolved cautiously. He called every few weeks, conversations that were brief but genuine. He'd started therapy and financial counseling, working to understand his relationship with money and his tendency to see people as resources. I'm learning that security isn't about how much money you have, he'd told her during one call. It's about knowing who you are when you don't have anything to prove. Linda had begun making quiet donations to causes that mattered to her, including establishing the Thomas Barrett Memorial Scholarship Fund for first-generation college students studying skilled trades. On a beautiful spring evening, Linda was painting watercolors of Pelican Bay when she heard a car in her driveway. Nathan stood there, but this time he looked different, healthier, more at peace. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "I brought you something." He held out his hand, revealing a smooth stone from the lake shore. "I found this and thought you might like it, for your collection." Linda felt tears spring to her eyes. It was such a simple gesture, but it reminded her of the 7-year-old boy who'd once brought her treasures. "It's beautiful," she whispered, taking the stone. "I've been thinking about that first stone I gave you," Nathan said. "About what made it special. It wasn't valuable because it was rare or expensive." "No," Linda agreed. "It was valuable because it came from love." They sat together on her small porch, watching the sun set over the bay. Nathan told her about his progress in therapy, about the part-time job he'd taken to start paying down his debts, about the small apartment he'd rented after losing the house. "Rachel was right to leave," he said. "I wasn't the man she deserved to marry. I wasn't the man you deserve to call your son. You're still my son, Nathan. You always will be." Even after everything I did, Linda considered this. Love isn't about deserving, sweetheart. It's about choosing. Every day we choose whether to love someone or let hurt and disappointment win. "I want to earn back your trust," Nathan said. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Linda smiled, turning the smooth stone over in her palm. Trust is built one day at a time. One honest conversation, one kept promise, one small act of love. As if summoned by her words, Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wanted to show you this." It was an application to volunteer with the Thomas Barrett Memorial Scholarship Fund. "I'd like to help if you'll let me," Nathan said. "I want to be part of building something good with Dad's memory, something that helps people instead of just helping myself." Linda felt something shift in her chest. Not complete forgiveness, but the beginning of it. "I think your father would like that very much." They worked together that evening, Linda sharing her vision for the scholarship fund, while Nathan offered ideas about outreach and student mentoring. For the first time in years, they felt like a family again. Not the family they'd been, but something new and honest. As Nathan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Mom, I need you to know something. I don't want your money anymore. I mean, someday if you choose to leave me something, I'll be honored. But I don't want to spend my life waiting for you to die so I can live." Linda hugged her son, really hugged him for the first time in years. "That's the wisest thing you've ever said." After Nathan left, Linda sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and the 2 stones. The old one Nathan had given her as a child, and the new one he'd brought that evening. She placed them side by side, symbols of a relationship that had been broken and was slowly being rebuilt. She thought about Tom's letter, about his warning to let Nathan show who he really was. Tom had been right. Nathan had shown his true colors, but people could change their colors, could choose to become better than they'd been. Linda baked a small cake that night, Not for herself this time, but to celebrate the possibility of second chances. She put 2 candles on top, one for the boy Nathan had been, and one for the man he was becoming. As she made a wish and blew out the candles, Linda felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope for the future. Not just her own future, but the future of a family that had learned the difference between wealth and worth, between inheritance and legacy. Outside, the first stars were appearing over Pelican Bay, and Linda could hear the gentle call of loons on the water. She was 65 years old, wealthy in ways she was still learning to understand, and finally free to love without conditions or expectations. And that, Linda thought, as she cut 2 slices of cake, one for now and one to save for Nathan's next visit, was the greatest treasure of all. If Linda's story touched your heart like it did mine, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more real stories about family forgiveness and the courage it takes to rebuild broken relationships. Every day we share tales of ordinary people who found extraordinary strength in the most challenging family situations. These stories remind us that sometimes the greatest inheritance we can leave isn't money. It's the wisdom to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, and hope over hurt. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe that families aren't just born, they're built one honest conversation at a time.